Welcome back to the How to Move Your Body year-long yoga program. I'm Brentan, and today's practice is going to focus on getting our spine moving in the direction of flexion. And that's this sort of roly-poly shape in the spine. So very important that our spine is mobilized in all the ways that it can potentially move. And to get started, let's go ahead and join on the feet. And now you can set your feet up. Feel free to set your feet up any way that you like. And we'll just kind of start to move around in whatever way feels good for each one of us right out of the gate. So for me, I'm gonna slide my hands down to my knees, bend my knees a little bit, and just start to move the spine back and forth from extension to flexion. And it's here that I just want to keep in mind that the spine is made up of 24 movable pieces. And those 24 movable pieces attach to each other at more than 75 places. There are more than 75 joints in the spine. So what that means is that each vertebra attaches to its neighbor at multiple spots, and each one of those multiple spots represents movement potential. So it's here that I want to see, can I distribute this movement evenly amongst all 24 of my movable pieces? And then can I get even more specific and distribute that movement one layer deeper to all of the different parts that can move those 75 different joints? After the next time you kind of round in, press through your feet, come all the way on up. You can sort of wag out through the knees a little bit up here. We want to get ourselves to a place where we can now segment those 24 pieces and move them almost individually. So we'll start from the neck down to the tailbone. And so what we want to first establish up here is just a nice neutral standing position where everything is feeling pretty active. You have access, your attention has access to each part of your body, so you can feel your toes, you can feel your feet. We just want to feel ourselves really nice and evenly weighted through the feet. Leg muscles a little active. Sometimes I wag my knees to get that to happen. And then I want to feel the pelvis is upright in the body. So to just kind of feel that a little bit more, we can fold the pelvis forward. We can scoop the pelvis underneath, sort of like cat-cow, but instead of like trying to do the whole spine, we're just trying to do the pelvis. And that's telling me like, okay, where is movement pretty easy, pretty accessible versus where is movement feeling a little stuck or a little challenging? Seeing if I can discern where a neutral pelvis is. And if I can discern my spine just kind of nice and neutral, where my ribs are sitting right over the pelvis, my ribs are not folding forward or tilting up, but again, the rib cage is as neutral as I can feel. Chest nice and open, skull drawing up and back. So you feel like the natural curves of your spine, the 4 natural curves of your spine, just kind of sitting in neutral. Now, what if we tried to move just from the upper spine while keeping everything down here really locked in and really still? So let's see how that would work for us. Let's just begin tipping the chin down towards the chest. I always like to use my hands to give me feedback, to kind of let me know, am I doing what I think I'm doing? And start to let the chin get even heavier down. And now start to keep that flexion going, so that nice rounding going through each one of the neck vertebra. And we're gonna start to take the upper back now. So the chest kind of rolling forward. And again, imagining each of those 24 movable pieces of the spine. Sort of the top one, once it starts moving, it unlocks movement for the ones underneath. And if you feel like at some point, like your vertebrae don't move individually anymore, they just kind of move as a clump, that's totally normal. And so we just want to give ourselves the time needed here so that the brain sends the command. And we're not in charge of how sophisticated we're able to act on that demand, but the fact that the brain sends the command is what starts that learning process. So just continuing to roll all the way down. Now once kind of like the lower mid-spine where the lower ribs are, that's starting to move a little bit. And so I'm going to bend the knees, just let them be a nice base of support as the spine continues to curl in and goes all the way down. So this time under tension, a very important aspect to unlock some new movement potential, to even allow the brain to sort of hit save on what we're accessing right here so that it can become more second nature, it can become easier to access it in the future. Now, once you've kind of hit that spot where like you're not feeling a ton of movement, we're going to see if we can roll ourselves all the way back up. So the legs need to be a nice strong base of support for us as we start as you start to come all the way back on up. Anything that feels good at the top of that. Oh, if you just kind of want to work out through the shoulders a little bit or just kind of move around. We'll give the body one more time to repeat that. So let's go ahead and start again. Come all the way up nice and neutral in the spine. And we'll start to unlock from the neck down. So chin down first. And slowly starting to, I can feel even, the more that you do this, the more sensitive you get to the compensations, like what else is going on that you maybe don't immediately notice is happening. One of the things is that other parts of the spine way down in the chain want to start moving just because that's what they're used to. And so the suggestion here is to notice all of that, to keep the lower part of the spine out of the equation until the upper spine sort of unlocks it by rolling down. Using the legs as a nice strong base of support, we can start to come all the way on upright. We're not looking for the easiest movement. We're looking for specificity, for accuracy, because that's where we get the most benefits. And as you come all the way on upright, again, anything you want that feels good here, even if you want to lift your arms a little bit. And we'll continue to unlock the flexion of our spine. Let's go ahead and come all the way down to tabletop position. So if you wanted to fold forward to make that happen, you can do that. But we'll go ahead and step the feet on back, take the knees down. You can have the toes tucked under or not, that's up to you. And as you layer the hands down underneath the shoulders, knees underneath the hips there, you can just sort of move around a little bit so that you could start to feel everything. Like, am I evenly set between the arms? Can I feel every piece of my arm? Does anything feel like it's working more than it should or over efforting? And if so, can I distribute that to some other parts that are feeling a little bit more asleep, a little bit more far away? And here, like, you know, the spine is set between the shoulders and the hips, which are incredibly mobile joints. So there may be some asymmetries between how the spine is set left to right, or at the top of the spine or the bottom. And so as we sort of start to move through some cat-cows here, I just want to see if I can get it to the place where I can have my arms and legs be in a position where they can support this whole chain of movement without altering their job. And I want to respect those 24 movable pieces and really ask myself, you know, flexion is starting to feel a little bit warmer, a little bit more familiar at this point. And let's go into extension. That's the opposite direction, the back bend. And now we're going to move into flexion from the bottom of the spine up towards the neck. So now, kind of freezing everything except the pelvis and the tailbone. Start at the tailbone, rolling that down towards the ground and pulling the front body in, and slowly moving from the base of the spine up through the low back to move towards flexion, keeping the hips over the knees. Working the front body towards the back body and just moving nice and slowly, segmenting each vertebra. And now once you kind of get to the very top there, let's see, we want to hold as much flexion as we can through our spine. And we're going to see if we can sort of challenge that a little bit by pushing the hands down and forward and stretching the pelvis back towards the heels. Really trying to maintain all that good flexion in the spine as we root down through the shins and bring the shoulders more over the wrists. And flowing through that a couple of times. So pressing ourselves all the way back towards the feet. And lifting the hips, bringing ourselves back to that rounded cat position. Let's take that one more time. Coming all the way back on up. Now we're going to see, can we control our way out of flexion, starting at the pelvis. So now keeping everything in flexion as best we can and starting to take the pelvis in the opposite direction towards extension. And just releasing each vertebra as its neighbor moves. And I can really feel here like my vertebrae where the ribs are want to move all as just one big clump. And so I'm really trying to get a little bit of segmentation, individualization there, because I know that it's possible. And because it's possible, I know that my brain wants me to train it. So rounding back in, let's segment back towards flexion, seeing if you can just move the lower part of the spine, then the mid, drawing all the way in. And one more time, holding flexion as best we can and segmenting from the base of the spine towards extension. Coming out of the arms now, we can sit back onto the heels. If you want to keep your toes tucked under, you can. And sort of roll out through the wrists here and just kind of observe what happened there. Assess, where are you stuck? Where is it easy to move? Where is it more challenging to move? Alrighty, so if you have access to a couple of yoga blocks, that's what I'll recommend. But you could always, if you had access to like some sort of bench or even like the side of a couch or something like that to put your hands on. If you have your yoga blocks, go ahead and place them at the highest height. And we'll take that tabletop position again here. And we want to feel like first here, can my pelvis and my spine be in a neutral relationship with each other? So can my spine be in its natural four curves? And then my pelvis in relationship to my spine is neither tilting forward like this, nor is it scooping underneath like this. And so if you can't really feel that, try to get a little bit more mobility by sort of rocking the pelvis forward and backward. And then kind of asking yourself, like, what would neutral be in relationship to the spine? And yes, we're pressing down through the blocks, but I don't want to feel my torso sort of falling down to the ground here. I want it to feel a little bit more sovereign, a little bit more upright. And what we're going to do here is we're going to be looking primarily at flexion, again, starting from the tailbone going all the way up. But we're going to add hip flexion in with it. And we want hip flexion to happen first. And then once we max out hip flexion, that's when we want to move into spinal flexion. You'll see what I mean. So from here, I want to see, can I press down with all of my limbs and lift my right foot off of the ground? And I want to see there, did my spine go into flexion to get that to happen? Did the lower spine go into flexion? You'll feel that in your pelvis. You'll feel that in those lower vertebrae. So what I want to do is get the pelvis and the spine back at neutral. And I want to see, without moving my pelvis, without moving my spine, can I lift my right knee off the ground and forward a little bit, like I wanted to bring it through my hands. Now I want I want the distance from my hip bone to my armpit to be the same on both sides of my body. So in other words, I don't want to be sort of like this, where the pelvis swings out to the side to make my work easier. So my pelvis is still neutrally set, and I want to get as much hip flexion here, where the thigh draws as far forward as possible without the spinal flexion going just yet. So I max out there. I can really feel it in both hips actually now. And now starting from the pelvis, now I start my spinal flexion just like I was doing. And as that happens, I'm going to start to flex my entire spine and bring my knee higher up towards my chest, higher up towards my chest. If it makes sense to take the foot down to the ground here, you can. And pressing through the blocks just a little bit, see if you can keep holding that space, that flexed space in the spine here. And now it's pressing through the block. If not, you're just hovering, right? Lifting the foot and seeing, first unfurling the spine. That's going to take the foot back a little bit. Get the spine in neutral where the hip is just working now to flex. Give a little bit more active flexion here. Keep your spine out of it. And then release it back and down. So you can come off if you like. So hopefully that makes sense. This is the movement of bringing the foot forward from a downward facing dog, even from a plank pose, things like that. And so what we want to do is we want really strong individualization before we kind of combine everything together. So that's what we're doing here. We're isolating hips, then we're isolating spine, so we can be specific and it's not like this wishy-washy thing of like, I don't know how to bring my leg forward, I just do it. No, now we know how. So come on back. See if you can get your pelvis neutral with your spine. Your torso is activated so it's not like sort of sinking down into the arms and shoulders. And here, can we lift the left foot off the ground without having that affect the pelvis or the spine? Now, can I lift the left knee off the ground and start bringing it forward towards hip flexion without moving the pelvis or the low back? So I want to isolate hip flexion from spinal flexion here. Now I deliberately add it in, starting with the tailbone going down. As I start to round the spine into flexion, I go from the bottom to the top, and as that happens, the knee comes up higher towards the chest. Maybe you have clearance to take the foot forward to the ground. If not, you're just hovering. And if you're forward on the ground, you can pause there for a moment, then pressing through the hands again, lift to the hover. And now we're gonna come out of the spinal flexion first. So unfurling the spinal flexion and just getting back to that hip flexion wherever we can. And release. How is it going? You know, can you feel those different aspects of the work here? All right, we have the option of doing the same exact thing, what we just did, but we also have the option of doing it from a downward facing dog pose. So for this downward facing dog pose, you can have your hands on blocks. If you're gonna do that, blocks on the lowest height. It starts from the tabletop position. Pelvis and spine are neutral. When the knees lift, pelvis and spine stay neutral, so I'm not tucking under to get that to happen. Then we press up and back. So just kind of breathe here, easy in your face. See if you can feel all parts of your body. Hips are flexed here, so that means your tailbone's kind of going up and back to the ceiling on a diagonal. And so if you can't really access that here, see if you can do some cat-cow movements in your pelvis to get a little freedom. And if that's not giving you enough freedom, step your feet a little bit wider, maybe bend your knees a little bit more so you can get the hip flexion, because it's not gonna feel good if your pelvis is super rounded down like what I'm showing. So from here, pelvis and spine are neutral in relationship to each other, same as what we were just working with. And it's here, can I keep my left heel on the ground and just pick my right foot up towards my right bottom and take the foot back down. And we'll just repeat that a couple of times. And then the next time that we lift the foot up, now keep the pelvis and the spine out of it, but start to squeeze your knee towards your chest. Let's actually even shift the weight a little bit forward, but keep your pelvis and your spine neutral with each other as best you can. Keep squeezing the leg in, and now start to flex from the pelvis, rolling it down, drawing the front body in. As this happens, maybe shoulders come over wrists. And then going all the way back. Spine and hip, spine moves out of flexion and the foot releases. Okay, so let's try it on the other side. Left foot can lift a few times. Trying to keep the whole rest of the body out of this movement. That's the value. Then, keep your pelvis and your spine neutral with each other, but squeeze your left knee in towards hip flexion. Hello. We're gonna start shifting forward. I'm gonna try to keep hip flexion more dominant than spinal flexion for now. But as I shift, now I'm adding. So tailbone down, front body drawing in. And going all the way on back, downward facing dog. Or tabletop, you know, wherever you were. So kind of getting off the hands, however you want to do that, coming all the way on up to a nice standing position. Whew. I have one more thing before we set back out into the world. Combining our hips and our spine movements together, such a positive thing. Let's go ahead, stagger our feet for a lunge. So 1 foot forward, 1 foot back. It doesn't matter how the distance, you know, whatever you choose, but just try to get your pelvis as upright as you can. Your spine is upright over that. You can bend into that front knee. And I want something where my legs can be a good base of support. So they're challenged, but they're not overwhelmed. And I want to feel my feet evenly down, into the hips. That's my base of support. So again, I'm working with spinal flexion, just having the hands dangling down by the side, keeping the lower abdomen in so the hips are working as I start to take the chin down and rolling from the top of the spine all the way down. Keep the legs working evenly here. Start to roll back up. And then feel like you're kind of lifting back and up over the pelvis to bring the back foot forward. And we'll simply switch our sides. So left foot forward, right foot back. So we're adding some complexity into it now. So the feet down, squeezing into the hips. We can feel all of that good stuff. Trying to feel ourselves nice and vertical, pelvis vertical. We're vertical up over that. And then arms down by the side, releasing from the top of the spine. I'm actually moving my hands onto my body so I can feel whether my lower spine is trying to do this with me. Can I feel my whole body? That's the challenge here, because the legs are doing different things. As you feel ready, coming all the way back on up. Feeling yourself lifting up and back over the pelvis to bring the back foot forward. You can kind of wag out here a little bit. And it's here any way you like. Let's go ahead and just come on down to a seat. Any seated position, even if you're up on a couch or a chair. And it's just kind of this position here. We can kind of move out through the spine a little bit. Nothing formal, nothing specific, just kind of whatever you want to do. If you want to rotate, you want to side bend, do some other kind of spinal movements that we haven't been super focused on today. And then just see if you can come to an upright seated position where the pelvis is upright in the body. You know you can always mobilize by folding it forward, tucking it underneath, trying to find that place of neutral. And then seeing how your spine feels here. If you like closing your eyes, please feel free to close your eyes. Just a little check-in here. So the nervous system has some time to process what just happened. And we know that the nervous system's number one job, the first question it asks before it does anything else, it asks, am I safe? And so start feeding your nervous system information from the outside in that you are safe so that it can shift into the rest and digest response. So all that is to say, just take some nice deep breaths as if you're safe. Feel your face release and relax as if you're safe. And just see how your spine feels here. Do you feel a little bit more supported, a little bit more upright, just by taking those 24 movable pieces and asking all 75 of their attachment points to move through their full range of potential? Thank you so much for joining in today's practice. You can feel free to sit here a little bit longer, or even lie down if you like, but this is where I'll leave you for today. So I'll see you here next week. And of course, if you want to move closer to us, get some fabulous resources for your spine and other parts of your body, consider donating to this work on Patreon. I have a link right down in the description below. So thanks again, and I'll see you next week.